there's this myth that the creative people have the secret sauce and that they're these, the lone genius that goes off into like some mountaintop somewhere and then comes back with a, fully formed idea that now is a brilliant thing, right? That is the most corrosive myth in our society right now, that for people to be creative. The creative process is the opposite of that. There's no secret sauce. There's no magic that somebody else has that you don't. There is a process. And I've talked not only just from my own experience, but I researched tons of this. I've spoken to creatives across different industries, and I found that consistently there's a process that they all use that is how you do the creative work. And what I call it's called the core design loop. And there's 6 steps to it. And so it's inspiration, framing, brainstorming, prototyping, testing, and iterating. Okay. And I'll go through each of those steps briefly so you can kind of understand. So inspiration is, what is it you're trying to build, right? There's got to be something that fire that's getting you going, saying, what is it that I really want to make? And it's most useful to think about this in terms of the experience you want to create for your audience, the problem you want to solve, the thing you want to give them, right? What's the hook that's happening here? And it could be some cool story that you want to have for purposes of game. It could be some cool new mechanic. It could be some component. It could be that you've got this problem in your life that you're so frustrated with and you want to solve it and create a new product to solve it, right? Doesn't matter what it is. That's going to be the heart of what you're trying to make. That's how your North Star. Framing is something that a lot of people don't talk about, right? And framing is actually one of the most important things that you could do, which is putting a box around your idea, putting constraints in place. Most people, again, think that the creative process is best served if you have infinite space and a wide sheet of paper and you can do anything you want. And that's also not true. If you're anybody that's tried to write a book staring at a blank piece of paper knows this problem. What you want to do is put yourself in as a tightly constrained box as you can to get started, because that's going to get your ideas moving, right? It's way easier to say, hey, listen, I need to get 5 pages done in 1 week, and I'm going to show it and post it on a blog post about this specific topic that I want. Or I'm going to make a card game that my son will love that he can play in 10 minutes or less, that I can just make by just drawing on cards, right? Like something like that. Now all of a sudden your ideas start moving. You can start moving the ball forward. And so you want to put those constraints in. It will help you with the process. Brainstorming, I have a very specific process for brainstorming, but the gist of it is that you want to go and get as many ideas as possible on paper. You want to usually a wide sheet of paper or use a note-taking tool like Workflowy or mind mapping software. Get as many ideas as you can and create a blocked window where you turn off the censoring part of your mind. One of the problems that we have, especially if you're analytical or you're a high achiever, right? The part of your brain is always criticizing every idea that comes up. Oh, that won't work because of this. That won't work because of that. And that is also corrosive to the creative process. You want to give yourself space to let bad ideas happen, right? Even if it's like, okay, this idea is going to require gold-plated plutonium from another planet to work. That's fine. Don't worry about it, right? You want to continue to write ideas and get past the right idea, get past the wrong idea, and get everything on paper. And then as you move forward in the brainstorming process, you start connecting the dots between your ideas to something that's cohesive. And then only at the end of the brainstorming process do you turn on the critic part of your brain, the elimination part of your brain, where you say, okay, now I want to make, what's the minimum amount of things that I can do to move into step 4, which is prototyping. And prototyping is where a lot of people get lost and stuck because they compare whatever it is they want to make. Again, this could be a book, this could be a business, this could be a game, same principles apply. And you're comparing it to the best people out there, right? I'm looking at, Tesla and Apple, and I'm looking at, fully published books and highly polished games. And I'm comparing my first draft to those. Of course, that's not going to work. The first version of the Tesla car was terrible too. The first version of, these things is always, the first draft of my book was garbage, right? Like that's just what happens. That's part of the process. So you want to make something that's simple, that's ugly, that just gets the fundamentals down, gives you something that you can move to step 5 with, which is testing, right? We all think we have great ideas. And we all do, but we also all have terrible ideas. And you cannot know until you actually validate them and test them, ideally with somebody in your target market. But you want to, find ways to validate what you're doing. And then based on what your feedback is, you move to step 6, which is iterating. So you go right back up to the top of the loop, right? It's a core design loop. So you're going to keep moving forward. And maybe your inspiration changes, or maybe that stays the same and you change your frame, or you just go back to brainstorming and figure out how you fix it, right? And you keep going through that loop again and again. And the more efficient and effective you become at going through that loop, the better your instincts are going to be in terms of when you're able to take in feedback and taking in that feedback without it attacking your ego, right? People are going to tell you when you make something new, you make some creative work, it's like your baby, right? It's like you're just this child that you've created, and you think everyone's going to tell you how beautiful and lovely they are. And people are going to tell you your baby's ugly. And you need to figure out how to be okay with that. And so you separate your ego from the outcome of what you're creating, and then use that process to move forward and make something that's great. So it's a little bit of a longer answer, but I think it's just a really, like, I want to try to make it as concrete as possible for people, because there is no better way that I have found, and through decades of research, talking to the highest performers out there in the creative fields, to make something that hasn't been made before. Right? If you want to make something that has been made before, you want to follow a recipe to bake a cake, or you want to, follow some diet regime, right? That's a different process. But if you're going to make something new and bring something new into the world, this is the process that works.
It's great. I love it. And there's parts of this that I've used in my life, and when someone starts going through it and they lay it out in such a perfect process, you start to say, oh, this is a process I've followed before. And maybe I haven't labeled it this way, but this is how I've done this. And creativity, it's funny because growing up, my dad and mom would say, go outside and play. And my sister and I would get super bored, and we would say, there's nothing to do. And our dad would say, you guys have no creativity, no imagination, right? It's not true at all. Like and we used to laugh, and we were like, gosh, maybe we aren't creative. How do we not have imagination? What kind of imagination did they have growing up that we didn't have, right? And then you get into the real world, and you start to realize that creativity is something that's unique to everybody. And if you know something well enough, you can think differently and above or below or outside of whatever else exists out there. And it's something that I've found really exciting. And when you talk about brainstorming, I like you talk about utilizing a couple of different systems. When I created the high performance life model, right? Love, impact, faith, and energy. This started from taking a big white calendar, like the old ones that you used to like take up your whole desk, and I would flip it over on the back, and I would just draw out who are the most important people to me right now. How am I not serving them? How am I serving them? And just brain dump everything that was on my mind in every category of life. And then I would prioritize inside of that to identify which direction I wanted to go into, and then how I would execute. And it was a super simple process, but something that required me going through. I was really inspired by overwhelm, just too much on my plate, and then started to frame it, started to go through the brainstorming. And I love the way that you laid this out.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing when you're trying to, and I teach, design and creativity. I teach creativity in workshops with the Wharton School of Business, and I've taught it to seminars to Fortune 500 companies. And it's this weird thing when you're trying to teach this, because I'm not trying to make up something new, right? And this is a process that exists and works, and I'm just trying to refine it in a way so that you're more consciously using it when you are using it, right? All the best creatives use this process. If they've never heard these terms specifically, that's there. But when you have a conscious set of steps, it makes it easier for you to circle back when you're like, hey, okay, I'm missing something here. Let me make sure I go back to that right step. And so it's just a refinement that people can bring into play. And that's the difference between the highest performers and, kind of B players, right? That little 2% difference can change everything. And this commitment to continuously learning and continuously improving is something that I've just built deeply into my life. Clearly you have as well. And so actually that ties into this kind of next principle that I haven't really talked about much before. So I love your acronym, right? The kind of life acronym, right? That gives you these things that are most important. It's very easy to remember. That's also really important as you're trying to teach lessons. And it's something that these are clear principles that make your life worth living and that help live the best version of your life. So you mentioned Dungeons and Dragons, and my background is in gaming. So remember the core attributes of Dungeons and Dragons. You know what those are.
I don't know what they are, but share with them. I know.
Yeah. So
I know just enough to be able to talk briefly.
Yeah. So the core attributes are like the main stats that represent your power in the game. So strength and dexterity and wisdom and intelligence, those kinds of things. Right. Those kind of your fantasy characters things. And so I was like, okay, well, what would your core attributes be to be successful in normal life? And so I use the acronym CORE, CORE, to do this. So first step is curiosity. You brought this up earlier, which is what made me think of the lesson, right? Curiosity is such a superpower.
Underrated.
It allows
so underrated.
It's so important. Follow your curiosities, find things you're interested in. When you are creativity is just combining two things that have never been combined before. You're not really inventing things new from whole cloth. So if you have curiosity in one field and maybe you're passionate about bird watching is suddenly going to come and connect to a passion about games. And actually one of the most successful games out there, and it's called Wingspan. It's a game about bird watching. I never would have thought that, but the designer was so passionate about it, and she loved the process and brought it together and created that community, right? So just following different paths, finding out what you love. You don't know until you discover it, right? Like even with law school, for me, like I didn't know I wasn't going to love law until I did it. And then I learned that lesson. It was a painful lesson, but I learned that lesson. And so following these different paths and being as curious as you can about different things. And it also works for basic processes. Like took me forever to get into a meditation habit, right? But once I learned, a meditation instructor taught me, no, just get curious. Like exactly where is your breath coming from? Where do you feel the sensations in your body? How does it end? How does it transition? What, like this, just suddenly you could find this incredible depth and interest in something as boring as breathing. And so curiosity becomes a superpower. Then the second step is what I call obsession. And that's that ability. Once you find something that you're passionate about, you need to become obsessed with it. Dive deep, stay focused, spend hours on it, right? Like you can't force this phase, I believe. Like that's why the curiosity phase comes first, right? You've got to find something that you have this natural inclination towards, and then you just dive into it. When I was playing as a Magic Pro player and I was at the top of my game, I was playing for 6 to 8 hours a day, at least 5 days a week. I was in it, right? And when I'm working on a new game or working on a new book, like I am in it, and you could barely distract me with anything. And so obsession, figuring out how to cultivate obsession. And I mentioned meditation. I think it's actually one of the best tools available to do that. Your ability to stay focused, train yourself to focus, the ability to block out distractions. So from, curiosity to find the thing you're passionate about, obsession, the ability to stay and have continuous deep work and focused attention on it. The R stands for resilience. And I'm sure that you could speak to this as well as I can here. There's things, life is going to punch you in the face. It's going to do it again and again. And you're going to have kids and family and work crises and health crises, and everything is going to throw its way at you. And some people are, have the kind of anti-fragile trait where you're going to have these bad things happen. They may throw you off your game for a little bit, but you're going to use them as tools for growth, and you're going to come back. If you're the kind of person that can do that, when you have a failure, we're talking about the core design loop, when you have failures in the core design loop, which is part of the process, does that feed you into knowledge and growth, or does it crush your ego and then you run away and hide, right? You have to be able to be resilient to the hardships that life is going to throw at you, or you're never going to make it too far, right? You could stay in a little comfort zone bubble and, probably have a mediocre life, but that's not what we're here for. That's not what your listeners are here for. And so resilience is key. And then the last step is the letter E here, which is it's a combination of empathy and enrollment, right? That if you want to really succeed, the first three, the curiosity, obsession, and resilience, you can, as an individual, become an unbelievably high performer. But if you really want to have a massive impact on the world, then you need to enroll others in your vision. And that entails having empathy, understanding what other people's needs are, putting their needs ahead of your own, and being able to sell and be excited about your vision in a way that brings other people in so it becomes their vision as well. And so those aspects, and as a core stats that you want to look for in your life, hey, where am I? How am I doing on these things? Do kind of a self-assessment. Am I curious enough? Should I be exploring new things? Do I get distracted easily? Do I need to be training my obsession? How do I do setbacks and resilience? Do I find myself having habits that help me grow from that? And then am I focused on others? I'm in a way that I can enroll other people by serving them and by bringing my ideas in a way that they can really become excited about and become part of their own. I think those traits are something, again, I haven't talked about very much publicly, but I feel like a really powerful way to frame these same kinds of goals like you're doing with your life acronym.
If you like clips like this, I have a similar clip here. And if you want to watch the full video, click here.